House of Gucci. What a truly awful and boring poster, by the way. Just a few pictures of the cast lazily photoshopped together. Ugh. Anyway, new drama starring Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, Jeremy Irons, Jared Leto, Jack Huston, and Salma Hayek, based on a novel which in turn was inspired by real events. The film was directed by Ridley Scott, which makes it his second movie that's come out not just this year, but in a couple of weeks after The Last Duel. And you kind of have to respect this sort of creative input, considering the fact that the man is already 83. Amazing stuff. Anyway, this film tells the story of Patrizia Reggiani, played by Lady Gaga, a lower middle class Italian woman who met, fell in love, and subsequently married Maurizio Gucci, played by Adam Driver, the heir to the high-end fashion empire. The film shows how initially Maurizio wanted nothing to do with the family business and was almost disowned by his father, but eventually pressured by Patrizia, he started getting more and more into it, eventually trying to outmanipulate and outmaneuver other members of the family out of their power, which involved lying, unethical behavior, hostile takeovers, tax crimes, and eventually led to a murder. That's as much as I'm saying about the story. So the film has been lauded, especially for its performances, and there is something to it, but I have to say that even though I found the film quite entertaining, I don't think it's perfect. It has some obvious flaws in it, but let's start with the good stuff. Production design, costumes, hairstyling, makeup, especially for Jared Leto, who is unrecognizable as Paolo. The music, they're all thrilling, and they help support the main part of the show, which is the duo of Lady Gaga and Adam Driver. They're both mesmerizing, and even more so together than apart. Whenever they share the screen, magic just starts to happen. Gaga is the performance everybody's talking about. She really disappears into the role of Patrizia and is fascinating to watch and hate. But I feel that while Driver's performance is more understated and subtle, he is equally as good as her and brings this certain colder, more calculated counterbalance to Gaga's more explosive role. However, this being the biggest strength of the film also leads to becoming one of its largest flaws, because the film shines so brightly with these two on screen together. It suffers when they are not there, when they become separate, and there is a large section of the film where that exact thing happens. In fact, Lady Gaga almost disappears from the movie for a good 20 minutes or so. And at that point you really begin to realize just how much they are carrying the film on their backs. Another thing has to do with the supporting performances. It feels like they are kind of all over the place in terms of the tone, especially when you start comparing them. See, Driver and Gaga are doing pretty serious, dramatic performances. They nail the accents and so on. Then you have Jeremy Irons, who is very serious as well, but doesn't even try doing any accent at all. And then you have Pacino and Leto, who are absolutely chewing the scenery, especially Leto, who feels like he's making a different movie than everybody else. It's like he's doing this exaggerated parody with an accent straight from the video games of Mario, while being in a completely different film. Not to say it's a bad performance, it is quite entertaining, and certainly he commits to the role 100%, but it's just so wildly different from the rest of the movie in terms of its tone, it is just jarring. There are also some pacing issues, especially with the fact that the movie goes on for 2.5 hours, and its pace is pretty slow right up until we get to the final murder. And it's like the producers looked at the clock and said, well, it's time to wrap it up, and the whole story just rushes to a very abrupt ending. Also, this is a smaller thing, but I have an issue with the editing. So usually when you have a movie that moves through different locations and covers a lot of time, like this one, House of Gucci spans 2 decades and the action happens in multiple countries, it's good to use the cinematic language to kind of communicate the changing circumstances. In terms of time, there's really not a lot you can do apart from putting a text over the screen saying the year is now 1983 or whatever. But for locations, usually you would do an establishing wide shot, overhead shot that will clearly communicate this is now New York and now we're back to Italy, just show you the location. I felt that was missing from the film, and so at times it was very confusing. Wait, where are we now? Back to Italy? When is this? Has there been a month that passed since the last scene, or 3 years? It's jumping from different locations and different times, and at times it gets confusing. I think this is something that could have easily been improved on. So overall, you know, it's still an entertaining picture. I won't say it isn't, and it has some great performances in it. But I certainly wouldn't call it a masterpiece. For that, it is simply too unpolished.